The suburban enclave of Maplewood was the epitome of middle-class perfection. Every lawn was manicured to exacting standards. Flower beds burst with seasonal blooms. And the hum of lawnmowers created a soothing suburban symphony. Children laughed as they rode bicycles up and down the sidewalks. And neighbors exchanged polite waves from their driveways. But even in a neighborhood that seemed harmonious on the surface, subtle tensions simmered beneath the veneer. Differing political views, unspoken rivalries, and personality clashes occasionally disrupted the peace. One of the more prominent figures in Maplewood's social fabric was Linda Owens. A woman in her mid-40s with an almost militant dedication to maintaining her idea of community standards. Linda was known for her vocal opinions and her willingness to enforce the rules, even when she wasn't asked. From reporting overgrown hedges to the homeowners association to confronting teenagers about playing their music too loudly, Linda saw herself as the moral and aesthetic guardian of Maplewood. As Linda drove home one sunny afternoon, her mind still preoccupied with the stress of her day at work, her eyes caught something that immediately sparked her fury. Across the street, in the yard of her neighbor Matthew Carter, stood a bright red, MAGA 2024 inches sign. It was bold, unmistakable, and to Linda, completely unacceptable. Linda felt her blood pressure rise as she pulled into her driveway. She slammed the car door shut and glared at the sign as though it were a personal affront. "This doesn't belong here," she muttered under her breath. Her frustration bubbled as she went inside, tossing her purse onto the counter. She couldn't shake the sight of that sign. To her, it wasn't just a political statement, it was an attack on everything she believed a good community should stand for. She paced back and forth, trying to calm herself, but her anger only grew. Something had to be done. Linda didn't bother changing out of her work clothes before storming into the garage. She grabbed a trash bag, her determination hardening with every step. "Not in my neighborhood," she muttered under her breath as she strode across the street. Her heart pounded as she approached Matthew's yard. Her eyes locked on the offending sign. Without hesitation, she wrapped her hands around the metal stake, tugging it free with a sharp pull. The sign came loose with a soft groan of protest. And Linda's frustration boiled over. She ripped the sign apart, tearing it into jagged pieces. The sound of ripping material was oddly satisfying, like exorcising a demon. With the torn pieces in hand, Linda marched back to her own yard, dumping the remnants into her trash can. She slammed the lid shut and stood there for a moment, chest heaving. Back inside, she poured herself a glass of wine, feeling a rush of satisfaction. She picked up her phone and called her best friend, eager to share her bold act of defiance. "You'll never guess what I did," Linda began, her voice alight with self-satisfaction. Her friend sighed on the other end of the line, already accustomed to Linda's drama. "What now?" "I tore down that ridiculous MAGA sign in Matthew's yard," Linda said, taking a sip of her wine. "This neighborhood doesn't need that kind of hate." There was a pause before her friend responded. "Linda, that's his property. Are you sure you're not making this a bigger deal than it needs to be?" Linda scoffed. "Sometimes you have to take a stand. If people like him get away with this, what's next? Confederate flags? Guns in the street?" Her friend hesitated but decided not to argue. "Just be careful. You might have gone too far this time." Linda dismissed the warning, feeling triumphant. She had done what was necessary, or so she thought. Later that evening, Matthew Carter returned home, a self-made man in his early 40s. Matthew was well liked in the neighborhood for his easygoing demeanor and willingness to lend a helping hand. A successful real estate investor, he owned several properties in Maplewood, including the house Linda rented. Though Matthew held conservative views and supported the MAGA movement, he was never one to impose his politics on others. As he pulled into his driveway, he noticed something was amiss. His yard looked different. Then it hit him: his sign was gone. Matthew stepped out of his truck and approached the spot where the sign had stood. The patch of disturbed soil confirmed his suspicion. His disappointment grew as he looked around, hoping to see the sign discarded nearby. His eyes landed on Linda's trash can, slightly ajar, with a hint of red peeking out. With a sinking feeling, Matthew went inside and pulled up his home security footage. As the video played, his suspicions were confirmed. There, clear as day, was Linda, marching across the street, yanking the sign from his yard. and tearing it apart. Matthew sighed, a mixture of frustration and sadness washing over him. He had always respected his neighbors, even those with different opinions. This wasn't just an attack on his beliefs, it was an attack on his property and his right to express himself. The next morning, Matthew decided to address the issue directly. He wasn't interested in escalating tensions, but he couldn't let this slide either. Armed with his phone and the security footage, Matthew walked across the street and knocked on Linda's door. When she opened it, her expression immediately hardened. "Good morning, Linda," Matthew began, keeping his tone calm and measured. "I noticed my sign went missing yesterday, and I saw you on my security footage. I was hoping we could talk about what happened." Linda's cheeks flushed, but she crossed her arms defiantly. "That sign spreads hate, Matthew," she said sharply. "I won't stand for it in this neighborhood." Matthew took a deep breath, striving to remain composed. "I respect that you have strong opinions, Linda, but destroying someone's property is not okay. I'm asking you to replace the sign." Linda's eyes narrowed. "I did this neighborhood a favor," she retorted. "I'm not replacing anything." Her words hung in the air, sharp and final. Without giving Matthew a chance to respond, she stepped back and slammed the door. Matthew stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. He had hoped for a civil conversation, but it was clear Linda wasn't interested in accountability. With a heavy heart, he returned to his home, already considering his next steps. Matthew wasn't one to seek revenge, but he believed in standing up for his rights. After consulting with his attorney, Richard Hale, Matthew decided to take action. Linda's destruction of his sign was a clear breach of her lease agreement, which explicitly prohibited tenants from damaging property, his or anyone else's. The next afternoon, Linda's doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Richard standing on her porch, holding an envelope. "Miss Owens," Richard began, his tone professional, "this is a notice of eviction. You've breached your rental agreement by destroying Mr. Carter's property. You have 14 days to vacate the premises." Linda's eyes widened in shock as she took the envelope. "Eviction? Are you kidding me? This is over a stupid sign?" Richard's expression remained neutral. "This isn't just about a sign, Miss Owens. It's about property rights and your obligations as a tenant." Linda's voice rose, her anger boiling over. "He can't do this. I'll fight it. You're welcome to seek legal counsel." Richard replied evenly, "But Mr. Carter is acting within his legal rights." As the door closed behind Richard, Linda's confidence began to waver. The reality of her actions was sinking in, and for the first time, she realized she might have gone too far. Word of the incident spread quickly, and Linda found herself isolated. Neighbors she had once policed now avoided her. Her attempts to justify her actions were met with raised eyebrows and uncomfortable silences. Desperate to fight the eviction, Linda sought legal advice, but the lawyer she consulted confirmed that Matthew's case was airtight. The law was clear: she had violated the lease. The realization hit Linda hard. She had acted impulsively, fueled by anger, and now she was facing the consequences. After days of reflection, Linda decided to take responsibility. She purchased a replacement sign and wrote a heartfelt letter of apology, explaining her actions and expressing regret. Summoning her courage, Linda walked across the street and knocked on Matthew's door. When he opened it, she held out the sign and letter, her voice trembling. "Matthew, I'm so sorry for what I did. I was wrong, and I hope you can forgive me." Matthew studied her for a moment, then accepted the sign and letter. "Thank you, Linda," he said, his tone even. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I'll retract the eviction notice. But let's agree to respect each other moving forward." Relief washed over Linda as she nodded. "I promise," she said, her voice barely a whisper. In the weeks that followed, Linda made a genuine effort to rebuild her relationships within the neighborhood. She attended community events, offered help to neighbors, and engaged in open conversations about differing perspectives. Matthew, too, played his part, encouraging dialogue and emphasizing the importance of coexistence. His yard sign remained standing, a quiet symbol of his beliefs, and of the lesson that respect must prevail over division. The incident became a turning point for the entire neighborhood, sparking conversations about respect and empathy. Both Linda and Matthew grew from the experience, finding a shared understanding despite their differences. Before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed a neighborhood dispute escalate like this? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories of growth and redemption. Thank you for staying with us through this journey of accountability and growth. This story reminds us all that our actions have consequences. And it's never too late to make things right. Whether it's a misunderstanding with a neighbor or a mistake that costs more than we expected. Humility and courage can pave the way for redemption and respect. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to take responsibility for a misstep or stand up for your rights? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another tale of resilience and transformation. Until next time, remember, it's not about who's right or wrong, but about how we grow from the lessons life throws our way. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.